In this video, I'm going to show you how to create Facebook lookalike audiences. In fact, I'm going to show you a better way to use lookalike audiences in your Facebook ads and Instagram ads, a way that can get you much better results today. So let's first quickly get started with what a lookalike audience actually is. So here I've got Meta's support doc up about lookalike audiences, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I just want to quickly read out the first sentence where Meta is defining what a lookalike audience is. And they say, a lookalike audience is a way your ads can reach new people who are likely to be interested in your business because they share similar characteristics to your existing customers. And the way lookalike audiences work is you take a source audience, a group of people. It could be people that have bought from you previously. It could be people that have visited your website, perhaps people that have watched 75% or more of a video of yours on Facebook or Instagram. And you say to Meta, you say, look, these people are just the sort of people I want to reach. They love my stuff, they're engaged, they bought from me previously. Can you take this group of people that I'm giving you and go out and find people that are similar to them, that have perhaps similar interests, similar behaviors online, perhaps they're similar from a demographic standpoint, they live in similar locations, and create me an audience of people that are similar to this group. That's who I'd really like to advertise to. These people are highly likely to be interested in whatever I have to offer. If they're similar to my existing customers, it's going to be a no-brainer. It's going to work really well. That's what a lookalike audience is, and that's how it's structured. So that we'll explain more as we go through, and you'll understand more if you're new to lookalike audiences of how that's going to look. But hopefully you can already start to see the power of lookalike audiences when used properly. Meta have so many data points based on people's activity, not only within Facebook and Instagram, but also the stuff they track outside of those platforms. And that really allows them to work out very accurately who is similar to your existing customers, website visitors, etc. And these can be really, really powerful cold audiences, allow you to scale Facebook and Instagram ad campaigns, and can be a huge part of Facebook ad campaigns being successful and being able to be scaled and all that sort of stuff. So with that said, let me show you now how you create Facebook lookalike audiences, and then we'll get into how you use them and how you get the best results out of them today, which is very different to what we did even a year ago. So I'm here in Ads Manager. I've got an example ad account up, and you want to go ahead and jump over to the Audiences tab. So if you click on these three little lines on the left-hand side and select Audiences, so that brings you through to this page. Now, if you haven't created any lookalike audiences or custom audiences before, then you're not going to see these like examples like I've got in front of me, and that's absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. You'll see something slightly different, but you can just ignore these for the time being. The important part is to go ahead and click on Create Audience. Now, you can see there's a few different options. Now, it's tempting, obviously, we're creating Facebook lookalike audiences here, to click on Lookalike Audience, but that's not actually what you want to do first. First, you want to click on Custom Audience. And the reason why is because we need to create a source audience for our lookalike audience first. If we're going to ask Meta to create an audience of people that are similar to another group of people, we need to tell them what that initial group is, that source audience is first. You do that by creating a custom audience. Now, there are tons of different options, different types of Facebook lookalike audiences that you can create. And I actually recommend that you use a bunch of different ones. I'm going to go through each one in this video. It's all going to be covered. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create these in order of priority. So starting with the most effective down to the least effective, but the old order of priority, the one that most Facebook advertisers are still using, that is now pretty much all of a sudden, fairly recently, outdated. So I'm going to create them under the old setup and show you exactly how they all work. It's important because you still need to be able to create all of those and use them in your Facebook ad campaigns. And then I'm going to show you the big change that we're making now to get the best results from lookalike audiences, given the changes we've seen, the many changes we've seen to Facebook and Instagram advertising over the past 12 months or so, because things are different. So historically, the best lookalike audience to create is one based off your previous customers. So people that have bought from you previously. Obviously, advertising to people that are very similar to people that have actually parted with their money for your whatever it is you have to offer is going to be a great option. So there are a couple of different ways to do that. The easiest one is to select customer list and then click on next. And then from here, we can import the data that we need to use to create our source audience from previous customers. And then we can obviously use that as a source for our lookalike audience. So if you use MailChimp as a place where you store your customer data, maybe use it as your email service provider, then you can just very simply import from MailChimp. So you click on that button, you just walk through the steps. It's very straightforward. You log into your MailChimp account, you select which list you want to use, you import that in, done, really straightforward and simple. I'm not going to demonstrate that because, as I said, you can just follow through. If you don't use MailChimp, perhaps you use another email service provider, perhaps you store your data in a CRM, perhaps you've just got like an Excel file with your previous customer information, something like that. All those setups absolutely fine. You can still do this process. You just want to go ahead and click on next. Then you decide whether there's a column within that let's say Excel file, if you imagine it that way, that has value. So if this is a previous customer list, do you have it recorded how much each customer spent? Some will, some won't, depending on where you're getting that data from. I'm going to select no. If you do have that information, you definitely want to click on yes, and again, go through the steps involved, because it's useful not only for Meta to be able to see, okay, these are the people that bought from this company previously, who's like them, but also within these people that have bought from them previously, some of them have spent 3 times as much as others. Can we create a lookalike audience that is more weighted towards the people that spend more, the types of people that spend more with this business? So worth having if available. I've just got an example to upload that doesn't, so I'm going to click no for now. And then you just upload a list. You can see that you can do that in a .csv or txt file. You'll almost certainly, depending on what CRM, email service provider you use, be able to export a list that is in CSV format, and then you can just simply go ahead and upload that. Again, you could do the same basically with an Excel file. So if I go ahead and click on upload file, and then click on example customer list and open, we can see that that's gone in there, example customer list. Name your audience, example customer list is fine. Just obviously name it something that's going to mean something and resonate with you. And when you come back and check it, it's going to be fairly obvious. Then I'm going to click next. And now what we need to do is match the data within that file to Meta's identifiers. So for example, this column that's labeled email, and I've just got ben@example.com. As I said, it's just demonstration purposes. Meta have thought, okay, that looks like an email address. Is that your column for email? Yes, it is. But if it wasn't, we could come in here and select a different option, but email is correct. You can see that was been mapped, and then one action needed. We've got name in as Ben. Meta haven't been able to work that one out, so we would just go in and say that is first name. The more information that you include in the list that you upload, the file you upload, the better. The more what you want is to provide Meta with as much information as possible so they have a better match rate. Obviously, we're uploading data of individuals. Meta need to take that data and work out which Facebook accounts, which Instagram accounts that corresponds to then be able to advertise to those people and identify them. If you provide more information, Meta has a better chance of working out, okay, this person within this file corresponds to this user, and you get match rates of a high percentage. Typical match rates when you're uploading a customer list might be something like 40 to 50%. They're not gonna be able to match everyone. People use different email addresses for when they purchase versus when they create their Facebook accounts and things like that. So the match rate's never gonna be super, super high. But anything you could do to improve that percentage is a good thing to do. So we've got 2 maps, that's all that's in this this example file, and we're gonna go ahead and click on import and create. Okay, now we're gonna park the creating a lookalike audience based off of this for now, because I want to run through all the various sources, and then we're gonna come back and show you how to do that later on. So let's go ahead and click done, and we've created our example customer list, custom audience that we can use as a source audience for a lookalike. But I want to move on to the next type of source audiences that we would create. So historically, a source audience of previous customers is your best option. After that, it's your email list. And the way you upload that is exactly the same process. So you click on customer list, click on next. Again, if you can use MailChimp, use it. Next, value. Probably not going to have a value associated with people just on your email list. If these are the people that haven't bought from you previously, typically, click on upload file, and then we use example email list and pop that in there. A lot of people have this as one audience. They will have their people who have bought from them and people that are just on their email list all bundled in together. I would encourage you to separate them out, at least for uploading to your Facebook ad account purposes. So in my mind, anyone on our customer list has bought from us previously. Everyone on our email list has not. That's how I tend to split it up. I appreciate some of you will have this overlapping. Then we go ahead and click next, and it's exactly the same process, right? So one action needed. It's the same file, same information, first name, import and create, done. So that is now a custom audience, if I close that down, created from, you can ignore these previous options, created from an email list and a customer list. Customer list, highest priority, email list next, at least under the old system. Next type of source audience that I would like you to create are ones based on website visitors. And here we have tons and tons of different options. So if I go ahead and click on website and click on next, there's lots of stuff here, lots of different things you can experiment with. I would encourage you to get started with all website visitors, so that's everyone that's visited your website, and use the longest retention period possible, which is currently 180 days. The way that works is that, let's say I create this custom audience today, right now, it will include everyone who has visited my website within the last 180 days, provided, of course, we can track them, iOS 14 permitting and things like that. I'll explain more about that later on. And provided, of course, we had our pixel installed on our website to be able to gather this information during that time period as well. But that's now going to move. So if I create it today, it's always going to be from the day at which you look at it, from today, 180 days into the past. So every 30 days, it's going to move on and it goes through that way. Now, I'd encourage you to get started with this because this is going to give you the largest possible website visitor custom audience. And when it comes to creating source audiences for lookalike audiences, the larger the source audience, the more people you have in the source audience, the better. The reason why is because the more data you give Meta, the more accurate that lookalike audience is going to be. If you give them 3 customers, well, that wouldn't be enough. Meta wouldn't let you do it. But let's say you give them a couple hundred customers and say create a lookalike audience off this. Yeah, sure, Meta could do it and that audience might perform well. But if you were to give them 20,000 customers, there's so much more data going in the first place that the resulting lookalike audience is going to be more accurate, and more accuracy leads to better results. So the most data you can get in here, the better. If you have a website where there's lots of different types of products and services being offered and you want to get more granular, you can absolutely do that. So instead of all website visitors, you could go with people who visited specific pages. So you can use things like URL contain. So let's say you're an apparel business and you want to create a custom audience of everyone who's visited pages on your website to do with hats, right? So you could say any URL that includes the word hat, if that's how you've got your URL structured on your website. I want to create a custom audience out of those people. You could obviously do different options for scarves and jumpers and trousers and whatever it happens to be. Okay, as an example. So that's one thing you can do. People who visited specific web pages. You could also create custom audiences of people that have spent more time on your website than others. So visitors by time spent. So instead of just creating a custom audience out of everyone that has visited your website, you want to only create a custom audience out of people that are in the top 5%, top 10%, top 25% in terms of time spent on the site. The idea being that those people have demonstrated more interest in what you have to offer, and advertising to people like them is better than advertising to just everyone that's visited your website, okay? So this would be a good option if you get tons and tons of website traffic, hundreds of thousands, millions of visitors every month. You might want to start getting more specific. With all these options, particularly when it comes to creating custom audiences as source audiences for a lookalike, again, the more people in that source, the better. So retention, I want that to be 180 days. Don't go with a 7-day, 14-day, 30-day retention period. You're just limiting yourself unnecessarily, okay? So let's go ahead and go back to all website visitors, because that's the option I think most people are going to use. So I'm just going to quickly call this all website visitors 180, and then we're going to go ahead and click create audience. Now, historically, the thinking was that your customer list is obviously the best source because those people that bought from you previously. Then it's your email list. People on your email list have typically taken an extra step to demonstrate their interest in your product, services, etc., over just someone that's visited your website, which is why we're going down the list in priority this way. The more someone does to show they're keen, the higher we rank them and the better they are as someone included in a source audience for a lookalike audience. Moving on, let's click on create audience and custom audience. And here we start to get into meta sources. Now, as I said, there are other options. I'm not going to cover those because they're either fairly niche and not that people watching this will be using them, or we just typically don't use them all that often. So we've covered the your sources section, and now we're getting into meta sources. And let's start with video. So if I go ahead and click on video and select next, and then the first thing you need to do if you click into here is select how much of a video of yours or multiple videos of yours someone needs to have consumed in order to be included in this source audience. Now, obviously, someone who has watched 3 seconds of your video may or may not be interested, to be perfectly honest. They might have just watched your video whilst stood in line or watching the TV, or they're having lunch and just scrolling through their phone, didn't really weren't paying attention. Whereas someone who's watched 95% or more of your video is likely very engaged, very keen, a really good representation of someone that's interested in your stuff. A good starting point for me, depending on how long your video is people who have watched at least 25% of your video. And of course, you're going to have to adjust this depending on the length of your video. For example, if you've used a video that's an hour long, you would want to reduce the requirement to be including your custom audience, because how many people are going to make it to the 25% mark? It's going to be not that many. Likewise, if you've got a video that's really short, then you might want higher than 25%. You might want a 75% or something like that. So just think about it, go through the logic there and think about what might work for you. So once you've selected that, you then need to click on choose videos. And here you can select which videos you want to be included in this. So which videos do people need to have watched in order to be included in this custom audience. So you obviously start with your Facebook page, Instagram profile, because it may be in different places. Is it within an ad campaign, etc. And then you would just select from the drop down if you've got access to multiple, and then you can go through and select, and you can add multiple ones of these. And the way it works is fairly straightforward. So someone doesn't need to have watched, say, 25% of all the videos are selected. They just need to have watched 25% of at least one of these videos. Hopefully that makes sense. You could go through and select all of these. It would depend on the type of content you've put out there. If, again, you've got different videos on quite different products and services that you offer, maybe you want to create one custom audience out of all the videos related to your, apparel line, and a different video on all the a different custom audience for all the videos related to your personal training services, or however your business is broken up into its various segments. Where possible, again, the larger the source audience, the better. So I'd go and add in a whole bunch, and I'm assuming I'm going to add in right now, but that's how I'd make it work. So click on confirm. Retention, the maximum you can use is 365 days. That's great. We want this as big as possible, so that's what I go in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and call this video viewers 365, and then you might need to get more specific if, as I said, it's not all the video viewers, it's people within a segment. So that's now created us a custom audience of everyone who has watched at least 25% of those videos on Facebook and Instagram. And that's a really good source audience to create lookalike audiences from. I'll explain more about why later on. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So if we click on create audience again and custom audience, next one I want to talk about is lead form. So we go ahead and click next. So if you are running lead campaigns using instant forms, which is the setup of what you'll see with the new ODAX campaign menu, or you're using the old lead generation campaign, you'll be using forms that appear on Facebook, Instagram, now called instant forms. And you can create custom audiences from people who have interacted with these lead forms. Again, if someone's perhaps submitted their information or even taken a look at a form, that shows that they're interested in whatever you are offering. Perhaps using them as a source audience for a lookalike audience can work really well. So the first thing you need to do at the top is select events. Okay, anyone who opened this form or people who opened and submitted form. Which one of these two you go for would usually be based on the volume you're generating. If you've generated tens of thousands of submissions, even many thousands of submissions, not quite at the 10 plus, I'd go with people who opened and submitted form. If you're not there yet, I would just go with anyone who opened form. There's always that trade-off, which hopefully you're understanding going through this, between quality. So someone who's bought and spent tons with you is the highest possible quality, versus quantity. How many people have actually taken that action? We want, obviously, in an ideal world, the best quality people possible in our source audience, and tons of them, but that's where there's a trade-off, right? Because the lower down you go in terms of quality, the more quantity you get, and this is part of the reason why it's important to experiment. Again, I'm going to talk about that more later on. So we're going to go with anyone who opened this form. That's what I recommend most people do. Then you just need to select your form from the drop-down menu. We don't actually have any forms associated with this example account, so there's nothing I can show exactly there, but just if you've got multiple ones, just select the one you want to use. And then we move on to retention. So the maximum, unfortunately, we can use retention wise with lead form custom audiences is 90 days. So again, that works just like how I mentioned previously with the website visitors, where it's going to update and continue to go forward. Yeah, we can only have 90 days, which means that's going to reduce the size of this custom audience. But if you have been using lead generation campaigns loads, this is still a great source for lookalike audiences to test. We're obviously going to go with the maximum. Then you want to go ahead and call it something like lead form openers. You could have lead form submitters, depending on which of these two options up here you select, as I mentioned previously. And then I'm going to go with 90. And I don't actually have any lead forms associated, so I can't click create, but you just click create audience and it looks like exactly what we had before. Okay. Couple more. Hopefully you're still with me. Next, Instagram account. If I go ahead and click on Instagram account and click next, then the first thing to select is your source. So this would be assuming you're operating with multiple Instagram accounts. Otherwise it would just be defaulted into the right one there. And then your events. Okay. So again, like with previous different types of custom audiences, like all website visitors, there are various options. So we can go ahead and create a custom audience out of everyone who is engaged with the professional account. And you can see that Meta provide more information around exactly what that means. So here they say includes people who have visited this profile or took an action on this post or ad, such as likes, comments, saved, carousel swipes, button taps or shares. We can get more specific. So instead of just people who've engaged, it could be anyone who visited this account's profile, anyone who is engaged with a post or ad, anyone who's saved a post or ad. I would recommend going with the largest option here, which is everyone who engaged, which is going to include all those other ones. That's going to give you the largest custom audience, the largest source audience for your lookalike audiences. And that's what we want, okay? Retention, 365 days, that's the maximum, that's what we want to go with. And then we just want to give this lookalike audience a name. So Instagram, actually not ad account, that's not right. So Instagram account engages, because they could just be engaging with you organically as well. 365, okay? And then we go ahead and click create audience and then close that down. And the last source audience that I want you to create is one based on people who have engaged with your Facebook page. So much like the one we just created around Instagram accounts, you can also create a custom audience out of people that have engaged with your Facebook page. And which one of these you want to use, or both, is obviously to some extent going to depend on where you're doing most of your advertising. Most businesses are going to advertise on both. To a large degree, you might be 70% one way, 30% another. Some are going to be more closer to 100% one, 100% other, in which case maybe you leave one of these out. It just depends on your specific circumstances. So again, there are lots of different options, and I would go with everyone who engaged with your page as the default. It's going to give you the largest audience for much the same reason as with the Instagram account engages. Retention 365, and then we're just going to go ahead and call this Facebook page engages 365, and then we're going to click create audience. Okay, so now we've created the custom audiences that we typically use as source audiences for our lookalikes, and we'll talk about priority and how we've changed things and all that sort of stuff in a minute. But first, let's go ahead and turn some of these into lookalike audiences. So if I just go ahead and select, for example, all website visitors, then you click on these three little dots up here, you select create lookalike, and Meta will automatically put this in as the source. So you see, select your lookalike audience source. We've got it here, but we could delete that out and add in a different custom audience in here. Next thing we need to do is select location. So for example, if I put in United Kingdom as our location, and I'll talk more about locations in a second. And then we want to select our audience size. So the way this works is you're selecting a percentage of the total Facebook and Instagram users within this location that you would like to include. So a 1% lookalike audience will include the 1% of Facebook and Instagram users within the UK that are most similar to our source audience. And again, we've talked about Meta's going to use all sorts of different pieces of information like demographics, interests, behaviors online, all that sort of stuff to work out who is similar to our source audience. I would recommend that you go with 1%. That's going to be the most accurate, the most targeted, but only if you are targeting an area that has enough people to make your resulting audience size large enough. So if your 1% comes out at less than 250,000, I would go with a higher percentage. Let me show you what I mean. So if, for example, I put in Ireland, and this is just purely based on population within that area, right? If I put in Ireland here and I go with 1%, you'll see that the 1% lookalike audience has 37, almost 38,000 people. That's too small. We're going to need to go with something like 7% to get over that 250,000 person mark, just because there's far fewer people living in Ireland than there are in the United Kingdom. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Obviously, countries like the United States with much larger populations are going to have much larger audiences. The 1% comes out at 2.7 million. You can't create anything smaller than that. That's absolutely fine. Don't worry about it being too large. That's not a concern, particularly at 1%, even if you're targeting a really large country. But I just wanted to talk about the smaller side because that's really important. I've had lots of comments from people over the years where they'll say things like, oh, I created a 1% lookalike audience and I got 500,000 people in the UK. Is that good? And you're like, well, it's not anything. It's but that's just 1% of the users in the country. That's not something to, it's not good, it's not bad, it just always is. If you're creating a 1% in a country, it's always going to be that size. The reason why 1% in the US is 2.7 million is because there's about 270 million Facebook and Instagram users in the US. It really is as simple as that. So I'm going to delete this out and go ahead and put in United Kingdom, and that will make more sense in a minute. And we're going to go ahead and use 1%. The high percentage lookalike audiences are larger sizes. As you scale later on, you're obviously going to want to use larger percentages, but to get started with, go with the most accurate, the most targeted. I have other videos on how you go about scaling lookalike audiences and things like that. Okay, then we click on create audience, and here we have it. Okay, this is our lookalike audience. This one is based on all website visitors over the last 180 days. As the website visitor audience changes as time goes on, remember it's always 180 days into the past, so will the corresponding lookalike audience. It will update automatically. So don't feel like you need to come back in and recreate these. That's all going to be taken care of, which is great. You can see it says populating right now. Estimated audience size is really small. Just give it some time, about 30 minutes usually. Lookalike audience will be good to go, and you could start using it to run ads. And that exact same process that I went through for all website visitors, you could go through for all these other source audiences when it comes to creating your lookalike audiences. Exactly the same. Just select here, 3 little lines, create lookalike, and then go through and work out which, and then work out your percentages and locations and all that sort of stuff. Okay. So now we need to talk about what we're doing differently to get the best results out of lookalike audiences. Because since iOS 14 last year and throughout that time period to now, we have seen a lot of advertisers saying lookalike audiences don't work anymore. Lookalike audiences don't work as well as they used to. And that is true for certain types of lookalike audiences, okay? So let me go ahead and click on create audience and custom audience. And what we see here is that these sources, there's 2 big categories. There's your sources up here, and then there's meta sources, okay? The lookalike audience is based off of your sources. The ones we've created in this instance has been customer list, email list, and website visitors. They have gotten less effective. And the reason why they've gotten less effective is because Meta is not able to track the activity that people are doing outside of the Meta suite of apps, so Facebook, Instagram, etc. as well. And that lack of tracking ability leads to reduced data, which leads to reduced accuracy when it comes to creating your lookalike audiences. For example, if we click on website and click next again, if we look at all website visitors as an example, you can even see Meta have got a warning up here that not everyone who visits your website is now going to be included in your custom audience in the first place, particularly if they're using an iOS device, like a phone, iPad, something like that. If I close that back down and go back into here, however, we have very, very accurate data for actions that take place on Meta, within the app itself, so within Facebook, within Instagram, because the iOS 14 update and a lot of the privacy related rules that are coming in and been brought in are all to do with apps not being able to track what you do once you leave. That seems to be where a line has been drawn. However, if you're taking an action within the app, the fact that that's trackable is somewhat inevitable. So all these things here are stuff that take place within the Meta family of apps. So video views are taking place on Facebook and Instagram. Lead form, again, on Facebook and Instagram. Instagram account engages is obviously what people do on Instagram. Facebook page engages is obviously what people do on Instagram. So if I cancel this out, the old priority list of effectiveness was sort of what we created here in reverse, right? It was customer list first, then email list, then website visitors, then video viewers, then lead form openers or submitters, then Instagram account engagers, and then Facebook page engagers. That was the list of how things went. That has completely changed. So these ones down here, customer list source, email list source, website visitor source, those have all gotten significantly less effective. So we are relying much more on in-app lookalike audiences. So the priority list amongst those is still the same. So if I go ahead and click create audience, custom audience, the most important, video viewers, then lead form. This is of course assuming you're using lead generation campaigns or even using video ads in the first place. If you're not, then you can obviously discount that for your specific scenario. But it's going to go video viewers first, lead form engagers next, Instagram account engagers next, Facebook page engagers after that. And that is the order of priority that we're going to use. I would still very much encourage you to test lots of different options, both meta sources, so things that take place within Meta, and of course your sources. And as the platforms evolve, there's going to be all sorts of things that happen. For example, I expect that as people use Facebook Shops more and more and more, there's going to be interesting stuff going down with shopping. I don't think most advertisers and most user behavior is there yet, but we will have more information on that. But using meta sources used to be seen as lower quality in terms of the people going into the source, therefore the lookalike wouldn't do as well. But the extra data that we can track and also the extra volume, you're gonna have way more people that have watched videos of yours than have bought from you and are on a customer list, for example. That has really shifted the balance. So test a whole bunch, test both your sources and meta sources, see what performs best for your business, but just be aware that now, after all the updates that we've seen previously, meta sources are becoming more and more and more effective. And if you tested lookalike audiences recently and it didn't work, and it was based on website visitors or your email list, try a bunch of these meta sources. You might be pleasantly surprised at what you see and how good the results can be using some of this stuff. Okay, so the next thing I need to show you is how to add your lookalike audience into an ad set and the adjustments you need to make if you're advertising on a local basis. So let's go ahead and jump back into Ads Manager, and then I'm quickly going to create a quick example campaign. So let's go ahead and just select sales, click continue. And then if we jump over to the ad set level, and I'm not going to adjust anything else, I'm just going to show you how to add in the lookalike audience. If we scroll down to the audience section, and under this custom audiences part, which can be a little bit confusing because we've been creating custom audiences as source audiences, but it's all treated as the same thing at the ad set level, you want to go ahead and put in your lookalike audience. So if I pop in lookalike, here we go, GB 1%, all website visitors 180, boom, that's what we've got in there. Now, a couple of things to mention around targeting lookalike audiences, right? Firstly, you don't want to go ahead and add in other detailed targeting options. So don't go in here and start adding in, interests, demographics, behaviors, things like that, because that's going to work as a narrowing function. It's going to take our lovely, nice lookalike audience that's got plenty of people in it and can make it just too small. So avoid doing that. You also want to leave your age nearly all the time. Sometimes you might want to be more specific, but nearly always you want to leave your age and gender parameters wide open. Because we've uploaded a list of people that are into our stuff, if that happens to be 95% female, well, Meta's created an audience of people that are very similar to the ones on our list, in this case, the ones that have visited our website. So if our source audience is 95% female, our lookalike audience is also going to end up being overwhelmingly female. So you don't need to go in and manually add in this age and gender stuff. The only exception to that would be when you're using a source that is perhaps not quite as representative as you would like of the new offer. So let's say, for example, you sell men's and women's shoes, but in this new campaign, you're only going to be selling women's shoes. Well, then you'd want to use a lookalike audience based on some of the stuff we've talked about, but then that's when you'd want to go in and edit the genders to just be female, because you've taken, the new campaign is on a slightly different track to what you had previously. That's when you'd want to use something like this. It's also quite important to only use one lookalike audience per ad set. Okay, so we've added in, for example, a lookalike audience based on all website visitors. We're also going to want to test lookalike audiences based off video viewers and Instagram account engagers and the stuff I've already described. I don't want you to add them into this ad set, because if you do that, then you'll end up seeing the data it'd be a blended average. If we added in 3 different lookalike audience in here and we got a cost per purchase of $15, well, we don't know how well the lookalike based on all website visitors performs versus the lookalike based on video viewers. Whereas if you go ahead and create multiple ad sets, you can have the exact same ads in each ad set, that's fine, and make sure you keep it within the same campaign, then you can see, okay, the lookalike audience based on our all website visitors doesn't do as well as the lookalike audience based off our video viewers. Let's focus going forward on the video viewers. It's a small point, but one that can make a really big difference. So just one lookalike audience per ad set, no other detailed targeting options. Honestly, if we were targeting the whole of the UK, and we wanted a lookalike audience based on all website visitors, this is exactly what our targeting would look like. It would just have the lookalike audience in, everything else would remain the same. Keep it really, really simple. Now, when I've created lookalike audience videos in the past, one of the questions I always get is what do you do if you're a local business? If we jump back to audiences and we take one of these examples, let's say Instagram account engagers, and we go ahead and create a lookalike audience based off of this, you'll see that, let's say I just wanted to target Bristol in the UK, which is a city. I can't do it, right? It's not coming up as an option. I have to add in the United Kingdom, and a lot of local businesses are like, but hang on, how does that work? I don't want to advertise to the whole country. I just want to advertise to people within the specific area. Here's what you do. You create the lookalike audience here for the entire country, and then you add in your location targeting parameters at the ad set level. Top tip, if you are doing this, go with a much larger percentage, because if it's 1% of the whole of the UK and you're only targeting a tiny little area, relative to the size of the country, of course, you want as many people in the overall lookalike audience as possible, so that when you narrow it down, you're not ending up with a small audience. So if we were targeting just the city of Bristol, for example, we would very often go with a 10% lookalike, make it as large as possible. If we go ahead and click create audience, and then jump back over to Ads Manager, and then jump to the ad set level. If I just select this and click edit, and if we scroll down now, what I can do is I'll delete that one out and put in the new one, because we've created a 10% lookalike because we need the larger audience size. So we've got a 10% based on Instagram account engages, and we only want to target Bristol. So you come in and add in here location, and instead of United Kingdom, delete that out. You would just want to add in the specific, whether it's a city or town or whatever, or county or state or whatever it happens to be. Bristol, England in there. It didn't come up with the options, I was just looking for it. And then of course you can do the same thing. Do we want 25 miles? Do we want that to be more like 15? It's up to us. Now this lookalike audience hasn't populated yet, so this audience definition stuff on the right hand side is meaningless. Don't worry about that. Once you've given your lookalike audiences and custom audiences more time to populate, this will make more sense. But this is how you do it if you're running this for a local business. Create a large lookalike audience at the country level, add that in, and then remember all this stuff in here operates as an AND function. They must meet this criteria, the lookalike audience criteria, and they must fit into whatever you add in here, age, gender, location, etc. And just before you go, there's a free resource I want to quickly tell you about, and that's a webinar I've created that focuses on one Facebook and Instagram ads technique, the single most important Facebook ads technique that you need to get right if you want the best possible results. If someone came to me and said, what's the one thing I can do to massively improve my results? This is what it is. It's exactly what I cover in this webinar. There's a link in the video description below. It's completely free. Strongly recommend you go ahead and check it out. And I also want to make sure you've heard about the latest announcements from Facebook. It looks like we're in for some really big changes when it comes to Facebook and Instagram ads. I share all the details in this video here. If you're involved in Facebook and Instagram advertising, if you want to be running campaigns over the next few months, I'd strongly recommend you go ahead and check it out.